Before we get to our episode on adding Prometheans, Frankensteins, and constructs to Mage the Ascension, I have some community notes. A number of listeners have asked for help finding a professional ST for Mage the Ascension. I put out a call, and we had the first person respond, indicating they offered professional ST services. That listing is now available in discord.me/magethepodcast in the Looking for Players section. This isn't an endorsement, merely a note that if you're looking for a game and you're fine dropping some coin to have someone else run it, that's now available, schedule permitting. If you're a storyteller that offers these services, drop me a line on Discord and I'll be glad to add to the listing. Again, a listing is not an endorsement. We've also received a few requests to talk about minor spheres. While I don't have any plans to do an episode on this topic directly, there is a new Storyteller Vault supplement available on them that contains 9 examples of them called the Book of Fragments. This was done by community member Pukaji. There's a hearty preview available, so you get to at least look at 2 sample minor spheres before you click buy. Link is in the show notes. Also, today's episode was recorded in my living room. I'm still getting the hang of in-person recording, so since we are in the same room, there was a lot more crosstalk and us interrupting each other, which I thought was much higher energy, but maybe harder to follow. If you love the energy or hate the chaos, either way, drop us a line, magethepodcast@gmail.com, or drop me a line in Discord. Kim and Griffin were great fun, and there was a lot of energy, and there are a number of outtakes at the end of this episode from sections I cut or dropped. Caution, some of them may be slightly explicit. And with that, on with the show. Hi, Mage fans. This is your host, Terry Robinson with Mage the Podcast, and I am in studio, kind of, and by that I mean my living room in Kensington, with 2 guests. I am speaking with Kim and Griffin from the Body Electric, which is a live play being run by our podcast friends at the show The Story Told. We have stolen cast and crew from them before when I'm like, someone needs to explain a chronicles of something to me. And that magic has occurred yet again. And we are talking today about Promethean, because when I think of a war for reality, I think of introspective people made out of other people.
Yeah, other people.
On a quest, and sentences that are just full of capital words, but we'll get into that in a little bit. How you doing, and how did you get into to Titterpigs?
Oh yeah, so thank you so much. Awesome to be here. I was one of those people where played a lot of the original editions of Old World of Darkness in high school, and we did it wrong and badly, and we're mostly just there for the pictures. And I think I made myself like a 3rd generation vampire, because I didn't know what those were. Yeah. And graduated to, oh look, a slutty satyr in Changing the Dreaming. I'm really, taking those steps, and then wandered away for a very long time and came back to it when I met Griffin, who was, you had been doing it for so long, and I won't tell your story, but you were trying to get everyone to play, and I was like, I know these. I know these books. I've seen these tomes before, and acted like I knew what I was doing, and almost got us killed at least twice.
It really has been like 12 years since we started gaming together, Kim. Oh my goodness.
Yes, it has.
Oh my goodness.
And my other guest is Griffin.
Yes,
hello,
everyone.
Perfect segue.
Much like Promethean, I got lost in my own introspection right there.
And became a little more human.
And I became a little more human while I was doing it. Oh my goodness, it's been 12 years since we started gaming together, Kim.
You haven't gotten rid of me yet.
Yeah,
You're just enabling me even harder.
Yeah, I think it's mutual enablement. It's a downward spiral.
Oblivion won't find itself.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So yeah, I guess to just answer the same question, like how I got into RPGs was I got a chance to play an angel as a high schooler in an Anomine game, and I was like, yes, please. And then I found out there were more interesting things to play, and just sort of kept doing it. And then met Kim 12 years ago, and then we've been gaming together ever since, including in my first Promethean game where Kim actually did the thing. Many games on and since, and then took a crack at Promethean 2nd edition, and the goal was for one of us to finish the game, and we'll get into what it means to quote unquote finish, capital F, finish the game, and my character did it. And
you won the Promethean.
I actually won a Titterpig. Yeah. It's kind of exactly right.
And what is the story told?
The Story Told is a podcast run by Logan Rollins and myself, where we review RPGs, where we try to bring on a lot of indie games, mostly, and review indie games where we occasionally discuss general RPG topics, and just have a ball. And Story Told is the sort of umbrella for The Body Electric, which is the Promethean actual play that we're running on Twitch and also eventually as a podcast as well. But if you watch the Twitch ahead of time, you can see how the sausage is made and get all the goofy inside jokes and stuff like that.
But as you've mentioned, I guess your shows would kind of break down into 4 or 5 buckets. You've done creator interviews where you're like, hey, this is a new game we're excited about. Tell us about it. And that has covered everything from like, oh, this is a game where you play hyper-intelligent kittens who've befriended a goldfish who's trying to make it back to space. And then also Battle Lords of the 23rd century. You've got breadth.
Yeah.
We'll put it that way. You talk about your gaming experiences where you're like, this is why I don't like the Smallville RPG, and it just keeps going. And I'm like, yes, I didn't know I needed this, but here we are. Actual plays, there have been a couple of those. You did one previously. There was the long-running series Fall of Giara, which I got to do the last Fall of Giara episode, which I appreciate because when Chaz listed it, it was listed as both apocryphal and non-canon. Like belt and suspenders before anyone thinks that anything in here is a lick of true as pertains to this fantasy world. Let me dissuade you of that.
To be clear.
Yes. Like, this is below fan fiction in terms of canonicity. Like, there are sugar packets that are more canonical in our game than that. Like, there are Snapple facts that are truer in the Exalted World than what I did. You've also done general game things, which has spanned like, hey, what do we think about GM-less games, as well as things like I'm trying to think of a how to address what it is like to play in a licensed world. The Story Told has breadth in terms of what it covers. You've recently started an actual play called The Body Electric. What is that, and kind of what is the what world does that take place in?
Sure. The Body Electric is a Promethean the Created 2nd edition actual play. It is a game that is about a handful of Prometheans. Prometheans are monsters, or Frankenstein monsters, which is the sort of short way of saying constructs who are on a pilgrimage to try to find a soul for themselves. Promethean is a game about Frankenstein monsters, but it's told from the monster's perspective and goes into the monster's experience of what it is to be almost human and to be on your way to becoming human. Conceit, the sort of big mystery of The Body Electric, is that many of the characters were created by like the generation above them of their creators.
Also Prometheans.
Also Prometheans, yeah. The generation of Promethean creators above them all used to run together, and they were this kind of found family together, and the player characters were kind of like the kids in this found family. And one of the older generation turned on the rest and murdered the rest and scattered the kids to the wind.
As you do.
As you do.
Yeah.
And so the deal with The Body Electric is that it's a year later, and now the kids and a couple of other Prometheans from different backgrounds have been having these strange visions of terrible things happening in the Rockies, and they have followed these visions back to the Rockies, where they are going to now confront the person who destroyed their creators.
Brought to you by Coors Light.
Brought to you by Coors Light. It is a game about sins of the father. You know, it's a game about generational sin. It is a game about
Survivor's guilt.
Survivor's guilt. It's a game about finding out who you are in relation to the people who made you, and like finding who made you and stuff like that. And it's also a bucket of fun because we have some really great players who are making strong choices.
Yes.
You did it with passion.
Yeah.
That's
I
when
love
there's
you.
9 ones on the
really
die.
giving me something to work with.
And this is a Chronicle of Darkness game. And do you run it kind of rules as written? Like, are there any large systemic deviations?
So I try to keep it rules as written. Yeah. I try to keep it rules as written mostly because it's the rules in Promethean are really sort of, they spark, you know, they're really wonky. There's the way that you use your powers. It's different than any other way that I've seen powers displayed. And also The other thing about Promethean's rules is that it's highly focused on this pilgrimage that you're on to find or create a soul for yourself and become a human being. And the further you go on that pilgrimage, the more powers you unlock. So it's kind of like leveling up, but then at the same time, as you take steps on that pilgrimage, you lose powers. And really, at the end of the day, you're leveling up so that you can lose every bit of power that you've got and just become a normal human being, which is a beautiful inversion of the leveling system that we're used to.
The end goal, unlike any other game, you're not trying to become an archmage. You're not trying to become, you're becoming a regular meat sack human. That's what you want, and you want it so bad. It drives you. I just want to be normal in a world of darkness where horrible things could happen to me mere minutes after gaining my soul and becoming a real boy.
So we've talked about that, and we'll get back to that a little bit later. But so what do you play in Promethean? What is the term for it, and what kind of things are shared from all Prometheites?
Prometheans. Prometheites. In Promethean, you play as different kinds of constructs, all themed around different alchemical elements. And so, there is a whole section of Prometheans that were built by the Frankenstein monster, who was originally built by either Victor Frankenstein or Mary Shelley. They leave it deliberately unclear in the book whether Mary
deliciously
Shelley,
unclear.
Deliciously unclear.
It's fabulous.
Frankly, Mary Shelley started the Frankenstein lineage, as far as I'm concerned. So spoilers, right? So the deal is that the Frankensteins in this game are all themed around the alchemical element of fire, which they get through lightning, but can also interpret as a real sense of duty and purity that is constantly frustrated by the fact that they themselves are these hodgepodge creations that seem very impure,
literally stitched together of parts of corpses, and in fact, if they need to, can replace or upgrade or gain, with just a little little light murder if needed, or grave robbing.
There can be scavenging
obtain a new armor, a new leg, or a new face.
As you
do.
Yeah. But only the Frankensteins can do that. None of the other lineages.
That's true.
Okay, so lineage sounds like a game term.
Yeah. Each one of these Prometheans with their distinct alchemical element is a lineage. It's one of your proper nouns for that. Is which lineage are you? And that's immutable. That does not change.
Okay, so most Chronicles of Darkness games have an X and a Y splat.
Yes.
Where one is what you are, another is what you want or what you do, and then sometimes there's a Z splat, which is either a specialization or a political position or something like that. So these lineages are the immutable. This is how you done got Promethean.
Yep. That's your.
So we've talked about the Frankensteins.
Yes.
What else can you be?
So you can be. So they have all of the major elements. So the four major elements. So you have all the four major elements, and then also they pull from different construct myths, which I didn't know exist, but totally exist.
Yeah.
So Pygmalion and Galatea in this game are the founders of a lineage of Prometheans. Galatea specifically is the first of the Galateid lineage, where Pygmalion has summoned the alchemical element of air and built a corpse that is the most beautiful. So Galateids, whenever you are playing a Galateid, you're playing a character who is built to some aesthetic standard that you probably didn't ask for, but that you are nonetheless held to by everyone around you. So they're the element of air. The element of water is
Osirans.
the Osirans, yes, who take their cue from Osiris and from mummies, and are sort of drowned bodies who are missing a piece of them. And what piece is up to you? There's the classic one that you can always go with if you want to. Yeah.
Shins.
Shinless Promethean. Shinless Promethean.
Arise, shinless creation, and shamble stiffly toward the door.
And have difficulty playing soccer. Another shin-intensive game.
Watch low tables.
There are Osirans. There is, we've done fire, air, and water. There's Earth, who are the Tammuz.
My favorite.
Yeah.
My favorite. My heart.
Do you want to talk about the Tammuz?
My heart belongs to the Tammuz. The Tammuz are sort of kind of loosely, roughly based. I know in first edition they were based on the Golem of Prague and sort of traditional Jewish golem folklore. Here, I think it's a little bit more of the Babylonian myth.
Sumerian, yeah.
Sumerian myth. And that's as simple as a corpse that has a word inscribed somewhere on it. It can be a scar, it can be a tattoo, and then placed in the ground, and they dig themselves out. So not literally made of clay or stone, but in this case, sort of
Rising
commended
up from
unto the
earth,
stone
yeah.
and rising up from it with something inscribed in them that kind of dictates the strengths that they have in particular. It can be a specific word or something symbolic, and that informs their course going forward.
They also have a handful of other elements that are added in that aren't strictly the Aristotelian elements.
Please tell me that they're like corporate tie-ins and the element of fun or something like this. Like,
no,
the element of Mountain Dew.
Exactly. I would totally play that.
I mean, to be fair, you could using the
actually.
extempore. We'll get to the extempore.
Yeah,
because Mars would totally have one of these, and then have a children's show in the '90s based on it. After Transformers.
I'm the element of Skittles. Yeah, put a pin in that because I think you'll be surprised to find it's not impossible.
It's not impossible.
But before we get to that, there's also the Ulgans.
Yes, who are the element of ectoplasm. They are bodies who have been shredded by ghosts and or spirits and then reassembled.
I don't know why they're ectoplasm, because that's effing metal. Like the way it's described as being made.
Yeah. They are shaman Prometheans. They're the only Prometheans who can see spirits and ghosts. And so they literally have a hard time because they're like, I want to be human, but I relate to ghosts more.
And their connective tissue is kind of still in that spirit world, and it makes certain things harder and a few things easier.
There are the unfleshed who have the element of oil. Kim, do you want to talk about that? Because that's who you're playing.
Yes, So in the Body Electric, I am playing an unfleshed. Unfleshed, unlike all of your other Prometheans, are not made of human body parts. They are some kind of human facsimile that is built for a purpose. Anything from like
Or Sussa Annie?
yes. In fact, yes. Your mannequins, your crash test dummies. But yeah, so I mean, yes, this is where your robots, your statues, not statues because they'd be aesthetic, so they would be egalitarian. So anything that has a purpose.
Okay.
And their big drive for them is trying to live within their own purpose and not just what they were built for. Your robots, your something a little more than a Roomba with googly eyes, but only just a little bit more.
So DJ Roomba as going on the pilgrimage?
If you gave him arms and legs, then yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You gotta add more than googly eyes.
The last lineage that you can play is called the extempore, and they are literally everything else, where you get to make up your own element and your own powers to go with it.
Okay. That's where the corporate sponsorship comes in.
You could do a corporate sponsored extempore. The coolest extempore that I have come across was a friend of mine who was big into statistics did an extempore whose element was information, was data, and so he ended up playing this this monster who was trying to view humans as aggregates, and
that's a good way to address people. Hello, fellow data aggregate.
Yeah,
it's fitting in seamlessly.
It was fantastic, and like he had all of this stuff worked out about like how he would change the ways like murmurations of birds would pass his character. Like he would alchemically disturb murmurations of birds. It was beautiful. Fun thing about the extempore is that no one has ever seen an extempore become human, and so
not sure if they even can.
It's not established in the game whether or not you can. So if you play an extempore, you can always have a lovely moment of learning that and then going crazy, where you decide to burn everything down.
But I'm the element of fun.
It's good to know that they can choose violence when they wake each day.
Oh, absolutely.
So you've mentioned that these things are all made. Do people, like, when someone creates a Tammuz, it seems like they're setting about to create that entity. But when someone makes an unfleshed or an extempore, I don't know that they're necessarily doing that if you're a sentient Roomba. How do you go from construct to Promethean? Like, what happens? What is that step?
So there are two ways that a Promethean can get made. One is that it's made by they are made by another Promethean.
Okay.
Usually a Promethean who's trying to do, what the Frankenstein monster did and like find a companion or like create a new generation, because, creating a new generation or creating a companion teaches them something about being human. So for starters, there's being created by another Promethean, in which which case the Promethean has an instinctive knowledge of the ritual that they need to do in order to make the new Promethean, and they set about to do it as part of their pilgrimage usually. There are other ways, though, and Kim, your character touches on that.
Yes, yeah. So a Promethean can also be created by a human or a non-Promethean being as their demiurge, in the true sort of like Victor Frankenstein creating his monster moment. And that can happen either deliberately through something that's discovered or learned, I would assume somewhat illicitly, keeping that forbidden knowledge and, oh no, I found it. I'm just gonna follow this book to the end and see what happens. It could work. Or accidentally, through the sheer passion of the creation, it can ignite that alchemical fire and create something that then inevitably, strangely, the human, or because it doesn't need to be just a boring mortal human, but what this mortal creator then finds incredibly unsettling and needs to dispose of and get away from.
So when you're dealing with demiurges, like specifically, there's a great thing where your own obsession as a demiurge is what teaches you how to do the ritual and channel this energy in Promethean called the divine fire or pyros, which is what you need to, it's the spark of lightning that you need to call down to create a Promethean to give the corpse life. And it's your own obsession that reveals itself to you in strange dreams, and it makes whispers and makes you go to those secret libraries and steal those books and dig up graves. It's sort of almost like the divine fire kind of possesses you to do its bidding.
It sounds like an almost traditional notion of genius.
Yes.
That something briefly takes you over and does this. So translating this into Mage, we've got a couple angles. There are going to be cultures that have rituals that allow you to create these entities.
Yep.
And that is a known thing that in times of duress, our group gets together and we take a corpse and we abandon him on the mesa and the spirits rend him apart, and then Mark comes back a little bit different.
Not Mark anymore. Yeah.
How was your vacation? I don't know.
What is a vacation?
Terrifying. Terrifyingly fun, brought to you by Norwegian Cruise Lines. The element of salt. This shit writes itself. I don't know how we're not sponsored already. So we could have a cultural tie. And in Mage, we had this period in the 19th century called the Promethean Plague.
It's such a good way to put it.
Exactly. We got some alliteration out of it, which I appreciate. 4 big groups kind of vied to do that. You had Hermetics that were creating alchemical creations, that were creating awakened homunculi. You had the Society of Ether, who were just like, body parts, lightning, what could possibly go wrong? Like, the book's real vague on what the intent was there, except for like question mark profit.
Yeah.
We had the Kosians, who were a technocratic group that were creating artificial life, and they were the precursors to the progenitors. And they're like, well, we made a thing and it can think, it's probably alive.
Yeah.
And then you had the constructors and the machinists that were creating the artificial forge bodies. And like that was a case of
attention.
Exactly. And you can tell it's an RPG term because there's way too many hyphens and everything is capitalized in it.
Yeah.
We love our proper nouns.
Yeah, these are dawn mice. How can you tell? Because it's all one word. That makes them special and different. This is a crab eel. I'm like, thanks. We have those established magical things where the goal is to create an entity. But it also sounds like we could have a mage accidentally make one of these. So a character is driving towards becoming a master, and part of Life 5 or part of Mind 5 or part of Matter 5, your avatar, the kind of the genius, capital G, that you invest in your magical workings, maybe it has an ulterior motive. Maybe this is something your avatar just kind of does.
Well,
there's a great opportunity in taking Promethean into Mage where like no creator gets what they bargained for when they make a Promethean. The experiment gets away from you because in Promethean, the point of making a Promethean is that's just the beginning. The actual experiment is the journey that the Promethean goes on and the life that they build for themselves, which is going to inevitably involve giving the mages who created them a middle finger, or rebelling against them, or
just terrifying them by existing.
Yeah.
If the mages want to create these Prometheans, whether willfully or accidentally, or alchemical fire in the world picks this mage and goes, you're going to become obsessed with doing this, and you're just going to do it, and gets in there and makes them do it. Either way, the end of the Mage Chronicle kind of becomes the beginning of the Promethean Chronicle.
Yeah, and just to riff on that a few more, mages, I mean, it could be something that, as we mentioned, it can be called on by your avatar. Maybe we have this character that keeps dying and reincarnating, and part of their ascension journey is to create true life. Maybe their character is always barren or is incapable of true creativity except in this form. To me, when you were talking about it, the hubris is not believing that you can create life, but believing that you can control it. But also, in addition to that, we could have umbral entities that are like, hey, this is how my group reproduces. We need to inspire mortals to do this thing so that we can continue in this weird mutualistic or possibly parasitic way. It kind of reminds me of things like Rhapsody and Changeling, where you're using that mortal creativity to drive something.
And I think that the Umbra is a perfect place to put the divine fire as hailing from in Mage the Ascension. In Promethean, there's no specific place that it comes from. I have my own theories. There's no specific place that it comes from. There's no specific definition of how the divine fire works. But I think if you're going to port Promethean into an Ascension game, the Umbra is a great place to start for the origin of the divine fire. Prime is also probably the sphere you want to talk about as far as like being the origin of, because also there's constructs and then there's Prometheans. Like construct, matter and mind, you can do that and it'll be an automaton. But Prometheans are on a journey to build a soul for themselves. So for me, that says Prime. And also there's this question of like souls in Ascension have avatars. So how do you build an avatar?
And interesting, this is kind of Kim is very fluent in werewolf. So one of the other ideas I came to is I feel like this is also an interesting angle for a more nuanced take on the Weaver, Worm, and Wild, that is one of the ways they are able to manifest in the world, as opposed to normally you have the Incarna, and then you have their servants, and then you have their servants, and then you have their servants. Maybe just a little blob of Weaver just kind of gets into your little robot, and suddenly you have a Promethean, and its version is to either it is driven to return to the Shanti or something like that, but maybe one of them goes on this other journey, and you now need to shepherd this weird embodiment of an Incarna or a Celestine in this other direction. So the world of darkness is full of weird, strangely powerful, and inscrutable things, and all of them can activate a Promethean.
So my question, like, yes, and if they do that, like, how does gaining a soul serve them? You know, how does building a soul serve them? What does a soul built in the philosophy of the Weaver look like versus a soul built in the philosophy of the Wild versus a soul built in the philosophy of the Worm? Those would be all like neat questions to ask yourselves about, like, not only just what, but how, you know?
And there's always the chance that your familiar could be more than you bargained for.
Yeah.
That you conduct this ritual of summoning and you failed diegetically in Mage. There is a Spirit 3 rote one can do to try and attract a familiar, and then you go through a bargaining process. But as you had mentioned, maybe sometimes the Divine Fire answers that call.
Yeah.
Because part of summoning a familiar is you need to create a vessel for it. So if you would like the companion spirit of dog, you need to have a dog that it can go in, whatever that may be. And maybe one of those things where you have to lovingly weave it as would fit whatever culture is your paradigm is drawn from. And then dog comes down and visits you and agrees to be your familiar, and it becomes a dog or whatever. I could see this being one of those things where maybe 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 divine fire is what answers the call and just mirrors back to you whatever your expectations are. And you wind up getting a Promethean instead of a familiar, and you're like, oh, you're not eating quintessence and you don't consume paradox. We've got this total other different thing.
And also, whenever you look at me, I kind of want to destroy you because I created you and I can't reconcile these things in my brain. Because like that's another part of being a Promethean too, is alchemically scarring everyone that you interact with.
Well, what does that mean? Like
So
we've used the word alchemical a lot.
We have, and sometimes it's little a, and sometimes it's big A, and it's tough. But one of the major sort of hurdles that you face in the game, especially, you know, one of those things you got to build and be able to work away from, is because you are not quite human. You, much like the traditional Frankenstein story, you unsettle people in specific ways. Based on which element you find at your core. You know, sometimes it's rage. Sometimes like with the Temas, it's sadness and depression and despair. With the Galateas, the beautiful aesthetic creations, it's obsession and passion and lust. And it can be very dangerous in that way. But whatever particular element you kind of have bubbling up inside you more than the others spreads to the people around you and creates a proper noun called disquiet, which is a role that all of the people you interact with have to succeed at to not immediately have this incredibly visceral reaction to you. And it can make dealing with humans very tricky sometimes, and it gets more intense under certain circumstances.
Can you give an example of what that could look like? Maybe walk me through a Promethean, what
Sure.
the humor is, and what the disquiet looks like.
Sure. So, I mean, the Galateid stands out as a really great run.
Yeah.
Mostly because I had a Galateid disquiet someone pretty significantly in a game recently. So, Galateids are animated by the element of air, and they are these beautiful creatures. The first way that they disquiet a human is that they make the humans sort of pay attention to them too much. The first level of disquiet comes in 4 levels. You fail that first check, you get level 1 disquiet. Level 1 disquiet looks like your brain just sort of misfiring a little bit. It's subconscious. And so you start to get obsessed, but you can put it aside. You have prolonged experience to the Promethean, you reach level 2 disquiet, which is where you start acting on it. So now you're obsessed with this thing and you're trying with this person and you're trying to pursue them. But they're also a person who's not necessarily going to meet your expectations for them. So you hate them because of it. Level 3 and level 4 disquiet get worse and worse and worse until at level 4 disquiet you love them so much you have to destroy them. That's a Galateid disquiet.
Out come the pitchforks and the torches at that point.
Basically, level 4 disquiet is pitchforks and torches.
Now, is this something that only affects mortals, or in Mage terms, sleepers? Does this affect everyone? Does this affect other Prometheans?
It does not affect other Prometheans. It does affect other night folk.
That's relatively rare.
Yeah.
Ish. Like, feels like almost the opposite of like enchantment.
It is disenchantment.
Well, and some of the other night folk might have other things that allow them to resist better than your run-of-the-mill mortal is going to be able to do. You know.
So maybe you've caught up with the Mage group because using Mind 2, you are able to resist this effect, and that is what allows you to work together, or alternatively you have some magic that is able to suppress those fiery passions or whatever they do, or you're literally using a forces illusion to make this person look like something else, which maybe it doesn't prevent people from being obsessed with your Galatean, but at least kind of takes the edge off.
I was going to say, I always sort of frame it for myself as a player as the phenomenon known as the uncanny valley, where if you see something that's supposed to look like a person, computer generated or something like that, and it's not quite perfect, your brain knows. And there was some post on Twitter going around that it was like, why have we as humans evolved this ability to see something that is almost human but not, and immediately feel like fear and discomfort and distress at it? Why do our brains do that? That's a great question, science. Get on that for us. But that kind of crawling, uncanny valley feeling, like if you're watching a CGI movie from 2004 and you're like, I can't take more than about a minute of this before I need to walk away.
Polar Express.
Oh yeah, that's good. With that one Final Fantasy movie.
I like this, though, also as an idea, because in Mage, we don't have a lot of robust resonance systems on how mortals can respond. So it makes perfect sense to me that a mage at Quiet 2 or 3, who is wrapped up in this, who is actively bleeding their view of reality out into the world around them, could have some of these disquiet effects. And instead of basing it on humor, you're basing it on the attribute of it. And so you have this excess of icy resonance, and people are literally frozen, staring at you for extended periods of time, or have like a very syncopated kind of speech. And at a higher level, when you walk into a store, everyone literally freezes in place, or what have you. Is the idea to keep you moving, or to prevent you from building mortal contact, or narratively, what does disquiet do?
It's one of the main dramatic obstacles that you run into, because Promethean sets itself up to have only about 10 Prometheans per continent.
That's not a lot of Prometheans.
No, it's not. There's about 100 on the face of the earth at any time. When you are playing Promethean, like I have a game with 5 Prometheans in it. That's half
most of the Prometheans
in the continent of North America.
Yes.
Yeah. So most of the people that you're going to be dealing with are humans, and most of the people who know how to be a human, which is that thing that you want more than anything, are going to be humans. So what it mainly sets up is it screws you on every front in trying to interact with humans in any way, shape, or form, because they're going to be most of the people that you interact with, and they're going to have the thing that you want, which means, of course, you can't get anywhere near them without horrible things happening.
Just touching on the fact that there are a limited number of Prometheans on the planet at a given moment, talking about the creation of them and what might cause these unseen forces to inspire a mage to create a Promethean is that if you have, let's say, touching back on the inciting incident of the body electric, a whole bunch of Prometheans die all at once, and suddenly there's this excess of this alchemical power roiling about in the ether. Well, not the ether, but roiling about in the Umbra, and it's just gotta go somewhere. It might come out and, hit a mage in the head and go, hey, backstock, we need to get rid of some of them, make a monster.
Yeah.
And there's something where something that happens in one story can create another story.
Similarly, like if we're dealing with a Promethean plague, we might get an answer to the question, like, what happens if you make too many Prometheans?
Yeah, do they start to kind of peter out?
Yeah.
I do like the idea, though, of this kind of being somewhat cyclical, because it creates an easy way for it to suddenly happen in your story. I could see a group of mages that are all kind of seized by this spirit. The spirit moves them kind of all at once, and either they team build one, they're like 2.5 mages, or something like that. Or in their own way, they're driven to create a Promethean that vibes with their paradigm. And what does that mean when you're like a virtual adept shit poster while this other person is like one of the last practitioners of like a particular type of indigenous belief? And mages on the world, like Promethean fever is sweeping the globe, but it lets you introduce it out of nowhere, and it solves the problem of, hey, why didn't anyone notice this before?
Yep.
The other angle is there's 5 of them.
Yeah.
Like, I run a pretty spare mage campaign where there are 10 mages in the city of Philadelphia, and this just like, Promethean is like, hold my beer.
Yeah.
Yep, it is. So you've made a lot of discussion about this pilgrimage, which is probably a capital P term because it's Chronicles of Darkness.
Yeah.
So it sounds like this is one of those things where you could introduce a Promethean NPC that is, as a mage is trying to increase their arete, possibly to become more than just human. You now have this thing that is more than just human, trying to increase their integrity stat to become human.
And yet somehow less than human at the same time.
Level up to baseline.
Yep.
So what does that look like? Do we get literal mechanics for self-improvement? Like, I hope this is like 7 Habits of Highly Effective Prometheans.
So in Promethean, you have different philosophies of how you can become a person.
Okay.
Called refinements with a capital R.
Okay.
They're all based around different alchemical metals, and each has different, like I said, different philosophies of what a person is and how you can grow. So you have the refinement of gold, which is, I am going to watch and mimic humanity, because that's the best way to become a person, is just to pretend that you're a person and fake it till you make it. Literally, their powers are about faking it till you make it.
Refinement being sort of the dependent variable, the one that does change.
Yes. In other Chronicles of Darkness game, this would be like your order in Awakening, or your court in Lost. The deal is that there are 10 different refinements. 5 of them are common, which means that they're well known. 5 of them are complex, which means that they're super secret. You, instead of picking one and staying with it for your whole pilgrimage, what you actually do is you plot out ways to move between the refinements at character creation, and then you spend your time trying to fulfill different goals in each refinement. And when you fulfill a goal, you take a step on, when you reach a milestone.
Step, capital S.
Capital S step.
Well, yeah, milestone, capital M.
Oh, okay.
When you reach a milestone in your pilgrimage, you gain some more power, and you have the opportunity to switch refinements and complete a different leg of your pilgrimage, basically.
And do you have to go through all of them? Is this a...
You chart your course.
Okay.
You have 10 milestones that you have to hit. You select, each refinement has 3 milestones on it. You select, based on certain criteria, which ones you want.
And that is something that you chart at character creation?
Yep.
Or okay.
Yes.
When Kim and I played this before, we made up our pilgrimages as we went. The book says to chart it at character creation.
I think either that can be something that's discussed between storyteller and players, because there's definitely some pros, especially if it's your first time running a game of this. It can be a little bit easier to say, let's just kind of see, let's see where we go. Let's see where the road takes us. And then once you've got a little bit of time under your belt, you can start planning ahead. And I think storytellers will find their players going, oh, well, this sounds really cool. Phosphorus sounds really cool. I want to go there. Plumbum sounds really cool. Yeah. Looking ahead and going, and that happens organically. So coming to it and then planning it out all ahead of time at character creation also can make a lot of sense in that way, because you're looking ahead.
I wonder if there's a way to steal this for Mage with the idea that every path towards ascension will look different, but seemingly has a few shared elements to it.
Oh, for sure.
That, like, you will plot out that your character going from Arete 4 to 5 That is the leap of crisis. And the one after that is the leap of rediscovery, where you reestablish your paradigm, and one is the leap of invention, whereby you discover or create kind of a new way of expressing your will into the world, or the leap of companionship, where
You're saying this, and it's just occurring to me that Promethean, if you want to do overlap Mage and Promethean is a Mage game where the characters are always on a seeking. Like they're always there's something guiding them to hit a certain bit of growth or bit of enlightenment that they haven't discovered yet. And they are constantly, but they don't get any time off from it.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to stop them at every turn and kick them out of town.
Every turn.
How on the nose does it tend to be? Like, because immediately it sounds like a show that has an A plot and a B plot, and it turns out they're always secretly related. And it's like, dealing with the Klingons and the Romulans is reflected in these two twins that have a rare disease that are in sickbay, and they don't get along with one another.
Terry, have you been looking at my notes?
Yeah.
They're very related, and they can be very on the nose. I try to mix up my milestones so that some of them are on the nose and also going to happen in the plot anyway, but still involve choices that the characters have to make. And then some of them, I really try to turn the screws on the players a little bit and make them work for it.
For lack of a better term, this game feels a little bit stylized.
Yeah.
It's kind of like no drama or something, like you're drawing from established archetypes. There are going to be similar steps necessarily. It doesn't have to, but it is one of those things where if you do that, it's not considered cheesy. Like you can run a very stylized game.
The book has those tools in there for you, and if you use the whole toolbox, that's where you're going to go for sure.
You are definitely also dealing with characters who teach lessons, right? Okay. Prometheans as characters are there to learn things. And so when you present every other character in the world, you do have a question of like, how natural do I want to make this character versus how stylized do I want to make this character, because I want a stylized character is going to present a theme or a thought more clearly than a natural character will. So you went no theater. I would actually go Brecht, which is my theater nerd self being nerdy.
Go Brecht or get wrecked.
Go Brecht. No one goes full Brecht. Not even Brecht.
So it is one of those things where you could literally have your character have that beat where they're the Galatian who's constantly the object of obsession of other people, sits at a park bench next to a blind person who doesn't realize what they're talking about, and this is the one person that they can get the true wisdom from.
Yep. Yeah. That's a scene.
And that's expected.
I want to run that right now, Terry. And that is expected, yes.
So it seems like, if nothing else, it gives us a toolbox for games that do want to focus on the Ascension notion of Ascension, which is kind of interesting because Ascension doesn't really have a lot of Ascension mechanics.
Yeah.
This game, though, does something that is... I love, like when you want to take that last leap, there's literally a die roll involved and you can fail. And it's not like an attack roll. It's one of those things where you build this die pool of all the beats that you've had and all the failures that you've had. And that kind of puts you in a situation where you can succeed or fail. I mean, it is possible to have a sufficiently high dice pool when you're doing this level up mechanic that you can't fail. But it also is it one of those things where periodically you will take a step back?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Depending on where you are in your pilgrimage, there will be different ways that you can become less of a person. Depending on, you can like go against the philosophy that you're following. For instance, you can go against the philosophy that you're following. You can use your Promethean powers to harm another human being. That's always a step back check. Yeah, there are plenty of ways that you can take a step back. And you can also, as a character, decide to give up the pilgrimage entirely and embrace the power of flux, which is the power of destruction, creative destruction in Promethean, where you decide to revel in the fact that you are a corpse monster and that you don't want to be human anymore.
Why would you ever want to work so hard to be something weak and pathetic when you are this powerful thing?
Kind of in the same way that in Vampire, Golconda and returning to humanity are like, there's this view in Vampire that Golconda is like winning. No, it is coming to terms with your beast. That's a bad thing. That's like, I've come to terms with my inner serial killer.
Yeah.
Maybe we didn't want you to come to terms with that.
Yep.
And likewise in Mage, you have the idea that you can pursue Ascension or you can pursue Archmastery. Like you have the power or the wisdom track. And it seems like there is kind of that. And I wouldn't necessarily present humanity as wisdom, as I imagine that there is a Promethean type that is super smart or super understanding in a preternatural way. But again, you have this choice between like dice pool or some other goal. So it seems like having a Promethean character in your game is a great way to make the figurative in Mage very literal.
Yep.
And
Yes.
in a way that Mage often can, because you can go to the High Umbra. You can fight literally with capitalism. And that is the glory of games like Mage and Werewolf, where you can literally see the taint at the heart of the world. But we don't have a lot on how to see that inner journey. But with a Promethean, we do. So you've mentioned that there are those who deviate from it. A lot of things in Chronicles of Darkness have like mockery breeds or like bad versions of it. It's like, that's the wizard with the goatee. He doesn't play by any of the rules. Are there failed or broken or fallen Prometheans?
There are. So one way when you're trying to create a Promethean,
Decepticons?
Well, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that can happen when you're trying to create a Promethean is that the corpse rises and it is a Promethean. Another thing that can happen is if you fail the ritual, all of the constituent parts break apart, become conscious, grow other parts to them, and skitter away, craving, full of nothing but hunger. And those are known
As you do.
And those are known as Pandorans. They are corpse monsters, but they're only made of parts of corpses, and they can disguise themselves as refuse or garbage or just inanimate objects. They're mimics. And then they go dormant and pretend that they're objects until a Promethean walks by and they feel the burning of the alchemical fire in the Promethean, and then they get hungry.
And they go, it's lunchtime.
Yep. And they pop to life and hunt Prometheans down. Those are the mockery splat, and Pandorans are another one of those dramatic obstacles, right, that exist to confound your pilgrimage at every turn.
The thing that made you, is that also potentially an antagonist? The Dr. Frankenstein?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Particularly if your creator was human, they probably spent a lot of time around you not realizing they were being disquieted.
Yep.
And so they have slowly built up this strange obsession and hatred for you. And so slowly but surely creators tend to turn on their creations.
I think very, very rare is the human creator that makes themselves a Promethean and is like, you can stay here. It's totally fine. Yeah. You don't make me uncomfortable. You don't, when the light hits you a certain way, I can't see the seams. It's fine. No, it's totally okay.
So we've talked about the Promethean quest, the pilgrimage, their leveling up process, how they raise pieces of the Triforce to become human and so on. What are the cool things that they get to do? Because this is a game where you could probably run it without having superpowers, but I don't know about you.
No.
I want the superpowers.
Oh, yeah, you want the superpowers.
So this being a Chronicle of Darkness game, there's probably a bunch of powers you get because you're you, like the Frankenstein has, it's like they're all really good with yo-yos or something like that.
Yes.
But then there's also a thing that you're disproportionately good at, and then there's probably this like buffet of other things that you can pick from.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm talking now because I want to be the one to talk
Drop
about
some
this.
sweet-ass powers on me.
Yeah. All right. So starting with your refinement, which is the kind of monster that you are, you get to pick one of two capital B bestowments. And those, you get to pick one of two. Everyone has two options. And that's something that stays with you on your journey. And it's usually something kind of physical, something about the things that your interesting, shambled together body can do. Frankensteins, have the option of like I think it's called spare parts, and they can, if something happens, they can go ahead and get themselves a new leg, a better arm, a better set of head of hair, whatever they want. It's an option. There are 10 altogether. You get to pick one. My character in the Body Electric is an unfleshed, and I picked, God help me, one called The Soul is in the Software, wherein I can detach part of myself and give it a slightly smaller set of health boxes, and it can go skitter off on its own and do some scouting and then come back to me and report on what it's seen. I can detach my little robot arm and let it creep around on the ground and find things out. And should something happen to most of me, as long as part of me is still there, I can regenerate from that leftover bit of scrap that survives. The Tamas, because they have a word inscribed on them, they get to pick some bonuses to some of their abilities based on the word that's written on them, things like that. So those are your bestowments. And then you get into your
transmutations.
Transmutations. Your transmutations change whenever you change your refinement.
Yep.
Refinement. And so you get to pick your set of powers, and it's based on, some of the elements that you're playing with. Each refinement gets to pick one of two sets of transmutations. It goes deeper and deeper and deeper into the book. And that can be anything from the ability to control or deflect disquiet. That can be the ability to heal your friends and share resources like your pyros, like your kind of mana pool, so to speak, that can be shooting lightning out of your hands. Lightning to heal your fellow Prometheans, or lightning to fry things, whatever you want. I can talk to computers and get them to do things for me, and I can also tell when a thunderstorm is coming.
One of the cool things about transmutations is that because they're all linked to the refinements, they are awesome tools that you get to use to try to embody the philosophy of the refinements. So like if you're on the refinement of gold, you get mimic powers and you get mimic powers. If you're on the refinement of iron, you get a power that allows you to transmute your corpse into a working human body, because the refinement of iron is all about understanding your own body and its limitations. That power is one of my favorite powers for people to come across, because like you get a functioning body. Like you've been a corpse this whole time and you get a functioning body. Like that's a milestone in and of itself for me sometimes.
And that was something, that my character experienced, and one of the things you can do is you can spend the experience that you gain as a player to calcify a particular power that you find exceptionally interesting or useful and carry it with you through your pilgrimage.
But I like this in Mage, that the idea that a character goes either through a seeking or maybe an extended quiet and comes out with some sort of, in Mage we have the idea of parlor tricks, which are magical powers that are kind of fixed, that will never generate paradox. And they're generally something relatively simple, like the ability to summon a business card or something like that. And maybe we create a superpowered version of that, okay, on this seeking, that a seeking is two things. One, it establishes that you've learned the lesson your avatar is trying to get you to learn, and it sets up whatever the next lesson is. So my character gains a dot of verite. Turns out with that dot of verite, I am trying to overcome my physical limitations. It is very cheap for me to get a third dot of life. Or alternatively, better body rote is always coincidental for me, or is at -1 difficulty. I really like the fact that like the power has something to do with the advancement that you're going to make.
Yeah.
And once you have that lesson, you don't necessarily get to take it with you. That maybe you always have this floating rote or dot or sphere or something. It will change, so don't get too dependent on it, which makes sense in a Mage game where your idea is to become the embodiment of magic and suffusing reality. That we have a mechanic that goes with it, and that too seems like something that can go with us. Is there ever a thing where you lose something to advance?
All the time. Because anytime you complete a role in a refinement, if you move on to a different refinement, you theoretically lose access to the powers that refinement gave you.
Unless you go through that calcification process.
Yeah, and that costs you experience that you could spend other places. So it's a choice. It's, do I want to spend this experience to become more human, or do I want to spend this experience to have my character remain slightly monstrous? And that can be something that could trigger someone to kind of get stuck and end up in that place of flux. I don't want to give up the ability to shoot lightning out of my fingers. I don't want to give up the ability to, have superhuman reflexes and be able to, turn on a dime and sense danger. I'm not giving that up. And then all of a sudden you have a pilgrim who's wandered from his pilgrimage.
So what fuels this? Like when I shoot real lightning at people, or alternatively, I use the transmutation of deception to blend in with mortals, or electrification. I just like the fact that it's like, this one allows you to heighten your bond with your group. This one allows you to control your body to better understand yourself. This allows you to deal with disquiet. This one is just electricity.
Yep.
This one's lightning.
Yep. And then with the electricity one, it's like, do I want to talk to computers, or do I want to shoot lightning out of my fingers? That's a choice.
There's also an EMP blast in the electrification one.
Yeah.
too,
It's a metaphor, though. It's an EMP blast on the inside.
It's an internal EMP blast.
For the soul. Internal EMP blast for the soul. Yeah, it's one of the lesser-known chicken soup books.
The emotional method.
So what powers this?
It's called Pyros. It is the divine fire. It's the sort of agent of change in the world. It's possibly what souls are made up of. It's the origins of the divine fire are unclear, deliberately unclear. But it's the thing that makes alchemy work. So the divine fire is neat because it suffuses reality. It contains memories of all the Prometheans that it's moved through. And so Prometheans can tap into this giant collective memory and have visions of past lives and also So it also may or may not have a consciousness to it called the principle. And the principle, it's unclear what the principle wants, but it seems to want Prometheans to go on pilgrimages to make souls. So again, if we were porting this over into Mage, big question mark there is like, what is the principle? What is the divine fire?
And just the idea that there's this kind of soul stuff that gets lodged in things. I like the idea that in Mage, we have the idea that during the Avatar Storm, the Mage's avatar, so you got a mage, they've already got an avatar shard in them. They walk through the Avatar Storm and they've got all these other little shards. And I like the idea that, oh, maybe when a construct of some sort goes through the Avatar Storm, it is made of the divine fire. It burns mages, but maybe awakens other things. That it is kind of the desire of the universe to be alive.
Yep.
And that could represent a new metaphysical force beyond the Trinity, the metaphysical Trinity or something like that.
We told you not to bring the homunculus into the Avatar Storm, but did you listen? No. And now we have a Promethean. Well, you're going to have to clean up after it, all right?
Now he has a long metaphorical journey to go on, and we're not going to be able to deal with how Fallon acts.
He's just in the back looking at his navel like, why am I?
Yeah. I want to be a real boy. Oh, they always say that.
They
This
always
is so
do.
weird.
I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head, Terry. Like the universe wanting to know itself, is something like what the principle is, or however you want to phrase it.
We are hydrogen that gets to have podcasts.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Exactly.
And I like that because it is something that very much comes from outside of the human experience, but is also kind of tied to it.
Deeply.
It centers life without centering our lives in particular. So how do you get this divine fire?
Just as a Promethean? Well, first of all, it's called down into your corpse when you are created.
Okay, you're chock full of it then.
You're chock full of it.
Okay.
You also regain some of it when at every sunrise because the sun inspires it in you.
Okay.
You can also sleep in your element. So if you are an Osiran whose element is water and you sleep in a bathtub that night, you can regain Pyros like that by a sympathetic connection to your element.
Okay.
Yeah, the Promethean house in our first game was a little interesting. It
Yep.
would just be like, well, you're upstairs sleeping in the bathroom. I'm in the basement. I've dug a hole in the ground, and someone's out back in the shed.
Yeah.
Some other capital words that I ran into while looking through this. What is a firestorm and what is a wasteland?
Firestorm is an abundance of pyros. It's sort of like what we were talking about, or Kim, what you were talking about when you're like, what happens when there's not enough Prometheans? What happens when there's too many Prometheans? A firestorm is a whole ton of pyros in one place that sets the alchemy of that place off, which can include thunder and lightning storms that burn things. Also can include like rains of liquid silver or plagues of frogs. Basically things start turning into other things too much and not the way they're supposed to. There might be angels there as well because the divine fire sometimes manifests as angels.
Is this culture dependent? Like, is that an element here?
You could make it culturally dependent. I think it would be more fun to make it completely alien.
Okay.
Or as alien as possible.
But the book can kind of let you, rules as written will let you do whatever works best for you in your story.
They give you suggestions.
Do places have a natural balance of humors to themselves?
Yes.
Okay.
Because you asked about wastelands as well,
Yeah.
right? Because a wasteland is an imbalance of humors in a place. That a Promethean who's sort of spends too much pyros in one place will scar the area and make it make it more thematically appropriate to their element. Like a Galateid wasteland, because Galateids are associated with the element of air. Air is associated with the theme of knowledge. Like in a Galateid wasteland, sometimes you can just never find the right word for things. It's sort of, they haunt the areas that they go to that they spend too much time in.
Okay, so where a firestorm is kind of an abundance of it, a wasteland is kind of, you've scarred it, and now there is that absence of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, this is something that we can use for Mage,
Oh,
as opposed to
absolutely,
necessarily at following your character, like, oh, you've done a bunch of entropic stuff in one area. You have alternatively consumed it all. Vermin cannot die in this area.
Yep.
Or alternatively, you go out the other side and you have that firestorm where just, every houseplant within 10 blocks is now dead and
or is
pointing at you.
blooming uncontrollably, too, is the other
Blooming
side of it, yeah.
And this also gives us an angle that if this is something that Prometheans have an intuitive understanding of, I think a Promethean could suddenly become a critical player in the Ascension War to be like, oh, you smell resonance. Like, we can use you to sniff out mages. We can use you to find nodes. We can use you to determine synergy and all sorts of things. So originally, and like you meet Gary the Frankenstein or something like that, and you're like, this is perfectly fine. And they're like, why are the technocrats after him, or why are the Nefandi after him? He'd be like, oh, he's the only one who can find the dark side of desecration that allows us to control the Philly zoning board or something like that. Canon in my worlds of darkness, most zoning boards are overrun by the Nefandi. So mostly so they can control
I mean,
lines,
mages out there, get your hands on a Tama's Promethean and just have him hang out. Everyone will just be too sad to argue with you.
I like that the only winning move is not to play.
Exactly.
Like, just stop arguing about the Ascension Board.
I don't want to, and I don't know why. I just can't. And you're just like, thanks, Pete.
Yeah. It could be one of those things where a Promethean who does enough, he could this heroes could form tasks, and that's something that we get from all other sorts of night folk.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, there's a big question about the relationship between like different types of mana. You know,
one of the things that also seems interesting is the fact that since there are so few of them, the societal constructs don't seem like they would be there. There aren't 13 houses of Hermes or anything like that. How do the Prometheans view their lineage? Like, is it one of those things where it seems more intimate than vampire clan on a certain level?
Yeah, it's very close family trees when you can find them. You know, you can usually figure out who your creator is and maybe who your creator's creator was. And then after that, it's sort of folklore. It's like
a shared memory too.
It's like folklore and a shared memory. It's, you know, I heard a story about this from this guy that I met at this point in time, you know,
or I didn't think this was possible, but I had a vision of some other guy doing it. You know?
So there's a kind of collective unconsciousness thing. Prometheans make a point in the book of how Prometheans share stories of each other's journeys with each other whenever they meet, and that, you know, whisper network is the closest thing you can get to a society.
Yeah. There's also, you know, landmarks left behind, almost kind of hobo symbols that Prometheans can alchemically leave for each other, and that can be a source of information.
And it makes perfect sense that there would be a secret mage language that all avatars have the ability to emblazon upon reality in this remarkably vague way. And I also like the idea that the person as a mage, when your death is near, you do something that prepares the awakening for whoever will have the avatar shard after you. And it could have been a monster, it could have been a saint, but you have kind of this... There is kind of this predestination in a critical way, in a small way, and how do you deal with that? Do I need to live up to this person? Do I feel obliged to right their wrongs? Do Prometheans have that relationship? Like, the person who made me was a monster. That seems like a real easy way to bake that into your pilgrimage, but...
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the character.
Okay.
If the player finds meaning in that story, then yes. We have a couple of players who very specifically were like, I want to be like, fuck you, dad. And I was like, great, this game can do fuck you, dad real well.
4 dots of fuck you, dad.
4 dots of fuck you, dad. Sometimes players don't necessarily want to deal with that. And so then we just alter their pilgrimage so that it doesn't. But it's definitely a very fruitful place to go to if you want to go there dramatically.
I'm just thinking a lot now as a player, how interesting it would be to be a Promethean in a mage game as sort of someone who kind of comes in as a 6th ranger and gets to be part of that. I would be fascinated to try something like that. You know,
it very much feels like a Promethean could kind of be your data character, the person who reflects on humanity.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Again, against the contrast of frequently mages become a little bit more than human. They are something that gets woven into the tapestry. They become more of an idea or a demigod or an exemplar or something like that. They kind of shed their humanity as another person is kind of getting it.
And then to have that sort of strange mirror of a character who is also more than human and yet craves simply being human. You know, and thinks of themselves as less than human sometimes too, can be maybe a necessary mirror for a mage to look into from time to time.
And I also like the idea that you had mentioned the Pandorans as creatures that the awakening didn't quite go correctly, and that is also something that we could get in Mage.
Absolutely.
That the avatar shard that was going to awaken them was stolen, and now there is this magely consciousness within them that is trying to steal that from somebody else. Again, that is another mirror that we can use. I still have more episodes I should theoretically do where I just go through Mage the Awakening and I'm like, here's all the things we can steal, but sometimes it's a little too on the nose. Do you like the fact that Disquiet affects other supernaturals and it kind of really prevents that Super Friends game?
Yes, because disquiet leads to cool drama, and I love cool drama. Like Promethean could, in fairness, there's a refinement that is specifically about interacting with other supernatural creatures and learning about learning about how to be a human by looking at things that are not human. So there is a Super Friends opportunity, but also Promethean is a closed enough circuit that like it's sort of. It doesn't need Super Friends to be great.
And how would you run it in different time periods?
With
gusto.
With gusto. There is a Promethean game that I wish I could run that like takes place at the start of the 20th century and works its way decade by decade through the 20th century. Because Prometheans only live to be about 100.
Okay.
And
only live to be about 100.
A pilgrimage could take that long
Yeah.
too. You could spend years and decades in between each step, going very slowly.
Yeah.
You know.
And it would sort of solve the problem that my Promethean games have from a structural point of view, where it's like, yes, these are very important things, but like we all have places to be, so they better happen, within 3 sessions.
Yeah.
And so like, how would I run Promethean in a variety of different settings? I would go to the Dark Eras books and just pick out a number of Dark Eras that I wanted to run, because the Dark Era for Promethean itself is the Depression, and that's perfect.
Why is that, and what are the Dark Eras books?
The Dark Eras books are Chronicles of Darkness books that focus on different Chronicles of Darkness game lines in different historical settings. They're all modular. They don't necessarily tell a coherent story. They're just about doing individual settings and seeing how that goes. They try to do decent, representations of different historical settings for each of the games. Promethean's main one is the Depression, and it's super perfect because Promethean overlaps with a lot of struggles about, what it means to be outside and what it means to be other. And in the Depression, a lot of people find themselves outside because they run out of money and are forced to, live in conditions that they don't want to live in. Promethean also is really good at telling stories about being isolated. And again, like in the Depression, things are shutting down.
Building a community out of necessity.
Yeah. And so... yeah, it's perfect because you're desperate. Everyone is desperate.
And I guess for me, what is it like one of the things that always gets me is I do not understand how to role play one of the paths from Vampire. Like, because you start with the presumption of being so utterly alien, but also being remarkably dedicated. How do you even role play that? Like in Promethean, you don't quite have all the pieces.
Yes.
What do you feel you need as a player to bring to the table to be able to role play that? And as a storyteller, what kind of bumpers do you have? Because in Mage, it is also reasonable that your character can become remarkably doctrinaire, so doctrinaire that you can't have a game. So this seems, you start with something that's a little bit more alien in this game. From the role-playing perspective, how do you deal with that from the player and from the storyteller side?
Well, one of the things that I think is especially interesting about playing Promethean, and this was something that kind of came up with our players in our current game who had not played it before, is that the entire game is character creation. The journey is character creation. I made the point to some of the other folks a couple of times that, if you make yourself a mortal, a mage, a vampire, a changeling, you've got some amount of history that you've experienced before, whether it's, the 37 years you've been on this planet before or the 300 years that you've been on this planet before. Whereas as a Promethean, if you're starting as like a level 1 Promethean, you're maybe 6, 8, 10 months since your creation. You're almost an infant. That can be a little unusual because it becomes a case of like, do I know how to speak and eat and walk and tie my shoes? And how do I know these things? And I think part of that is that the principal kind of shares this information with you. The corpse or corpses that you inhabit will share that information with you. There are echoes of things that you can say, yeah, I really don't fully understand how to relate to these people. I don't have empathy, but I can drive a car. You can take a data drive at character creation. As a player, it's really an opportunity to take a journey and say, I want this character to start cold and end warm. I want them to start cruel and end kind. I really want to take that journey and plan it out for myself. I want to become more independent. I want to become more vulnerable. And you get to, when you sit down and make your pilgrimage chart and you work that out, you set that course for yourself. And so it's a little bit more of like a long-term character study than just improvising in the moment.
For a pilgrimage, player selects which parts of the refinements they would like to do. They don't select what their milestones are. I make up those milestones and I hide it from them. And I make them work to find out what those milestones are. So you want to talk about like bumpers to keep them on. Like setting up milestones that are hidden from players that are tied to what the sort of the arc of becoming. By the way, I just think become is like the verb of the game.
Yes.
Like hiding those things from the players, but also giving them hints and clues so that they can come along and find it, and then rewarding the crap out of them when they do.
Big explosive rewards.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. This is not just a cookie after dinner. This is a whole birthday cake.
Yeah. And to be fair, like fulfilling a milestone is cathartic. Like becoming
Hugely,
becoming a human is cathartic at the end of the game. Yeah, but like even just making a step forward is like bells and whistles.
So walk me through that. Sorry, just
Sure.
So the player picks the refinement of gold. I want to learn by staring at humans. I want to birdwatch humans.
I'm going to go into this situation, Griffin. I'm going to go into this situation. I'm on the refinement of gold. I want to mimic. I want to fake it till I make it. I want these people to like me. So I'm going to go to this. I'm going to go into this nightclub, and I'm just going to stand at the bar. And I'm going to hold this drink in my hand, and even as I tip the alcohol into my mouth and it goes into my stomach and just kind of burns away because I don't have a digestive system, so to speak. You know.
Right. So we've come to this hypothetical juncture. Before this hypothetical juncture, I have talked to Kim about this character and know that this character is on the refinement of gold, but sounds like they almost find it the most challenging thing in the world to talk to people.
It's very challenging. I feel overwhelmed.
So there's going to be several sets of milestones that I could deploy here. One set is called an instinctive milestone. That's a milestone that's specifically based on Kim's character. So even just swallowing the drink, if we had worked it out at character creation that just swallowing a drink at a bar is enough, I could reward her for that and say like, yep, here you go. You're a little more human. You know, your spine courses with liquid gold and you become a little more human. There you go. If Kim is on the refinement of gold and she has selected a role on that refinement, which is an embodiment of one of the refinement's philosophies, let's say that she's selected companion. Companion is all about relating to another singular human being. So let's say that Kim's character at this juncture is at the bar, not just to be at a bar, but actually to meet someone.
I want to try and make a friend.
If Kim is then going to be at the bar, maybe have a little bit of an azothic vision, being like, yep, you're in the right place. The divine fire will maybe light up in her character's chest to signify, yes, you're doing the right thing. And then we play out the scene where Kim's character tries to pick someone up at a bar. And then if it happens, and she doesn't know that this is on the little note card that I have, but if it happens, I reveal that it's on the little note card and I give her bonus experience. And then I give her that milestone.
And I've completed that role. And
But the whole scene has to happen first and is full of rolls, full of actual checks to make.
ROLL to fulfill a capital ROLE.
Yes.
So, yeah. The only thing that would be worse if, like, capital D dice were somehow, like, a critical term in this game.
They're working on it.
Yeah. And so we have a mechanic for that. And, again, I assume there are mechanics to see if your cutie mark glows or your Teletubby belly is the appropriate color to kind of guide you.
So undoctored, unbeautified form that you are, the pile of corpses, the robot with googly eyes on it, whatever you happen to be, is your disfigurement. The azothic fire that animates you and puts you on this journey gives you kind of like a temporary little cloaking device of normality. And that's but But so doing certain things can cause your disfigurements to flare and become visible. I think you can opt to do it should for some bizarre reason that work for you. You can certainly always be like, oh, look at my horrible self. If you spend too much of your pyros doing something, it can cause it to flare.
If you spend any pyros doing anything.
That's true.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of things that will, kind of say, if you're using this ability, you can spend a little extra pyros to not flare your disfigurements. You can spend a little extra juice to keep that illusion up. The first time my character got drunk, it was a milestone, and it was great. and it's very much like that kind of a little bit of that Commander Data from Star Trek. Like I think I'm feeling something. Like what is this? No, I'm sorry.
So if we're interested in finding out how Kim's journey towards diabetes as a sentient Roomba is going.
Yeah, I think it's a tough sell because, right, people know what a vampire is. People know what a werewolf is. I think that construct myths don't have that much, sort of collective story to them. Ultimately, I don't think Promethean is a game about, being the supernatural creature. It's a game about trying to be human.
Absolutely.
Being the supernatural creature is just the vehicle for the dramatic story that you're on. And so whereas the other games get to have an identity about the type of character you get to play, in this one, like you have the identity based on the journey that you're on, and the journey is to become human. So that's like, it's a tough sell, but that's the selling point.
I feel like it's also hard to have a game about aspirationally becoming yourself.
Yeah.
Where like I have a job. I have to get up at 8 tomorrow. You're jonesing for this?
Yeah.
Like, okay.
But at the same time, the Onyx Path people have said that the point of Chronicles of Darkness and Worlds of Darkness is to look at humanity from the lens of a monster. Promethean does that real good.
Yep.
So if that's the thing that you're jonesing for, go for it.
And with that, if we would like to watch your
Sentient
pilgrimage,
Roomba?
if we would like to watch the sentient Roomba that you are develop diabetes and equal ran their way up to the path of the great work, where can we do that?
At twitch.tv/The Story Told Podcast, which is our Twitch channel. You can also go to the Story Told website, which I think is thestorytoldpodcast.com.
Nice. Griffin, Kim, thank you so much for being here.
Oh,
Thank you for having us.
This has been Mage, the podcast, where we embrace the lesser-known platonic elements of nacho cheese and Cool Ranch, but consider salsa verde beyond scope. Our show is made possible by our executive producers, and they are Buck Farmer, Oracle of Constructs made entirely out of Bee Gees records; Christopher Phillips, Oracle of Constructs composed of reasonably well-composed mixtapes; Jay Widener, Oracle of Constructs made entirely out of Nickelodeon slime; and Mikhail, Oracle of Constructs composed of unused ketchup packets. Also, Alex, Anders S., Andrew Edelstein, Anon, Berto, Boo, Buggers to the Six, Brad the Blue, Bryce Perry, Chris B., Daniel Scribner, Dan Svensson, David Roy, Dennis Osborne, Derek Semsick, Elliot Osborne, Gargle Noir, George Lara, Guy Conan Stewart, Yibble, Isabel Castillo, Jason Kennedy, Jason Vines, Jason W. Biggs, Jeff Bryn, Jenna F., John Magnuson, Josh H., Joshua Heath, Carl Halperin, Leslie Weatherstone, Matthew Prohl, Michael Creedle, Michael Parker, Morgan Aran, Nibero, Neil Patterson, Nikita Klaimanov, Oliver Schindler, Patrick Mulder, Puka G, Rachel Grace, Ralph Scheindhammer, Ricardo, Richard Bat Brewster, Robart the Robot, Rob H., Ryan Kendi, Samuel Tobin, Stephen Carton, Thrice Great, William Connolly, William Martin, W. Starter, and Zach Rules. Our EP shout-out is to Oliver Schindler, who makes me think of my fondness for the olive tree. In ancient Greece, there were a set of olive trees considered to be the property of the state, as they were descendants of the olive trees Athena caused to spring up on the grounds of the Acropolis. Each of these trees is known as a moria, or plural, moriae. The most sacred stands before the erechtheion. I have no idea how to pronounce erechtheion, and when I googled it, all the results just responded with, "Did you mean erection?" Oliver, thanks. If you super like this episode or super didn't, drop us a line at magethepodcast@gmail.com or at magethepodcast on Twitter. We have a hoppin' Discord community at discord.me/magethepodcast. If you like this, please give us a review on the platform of your choosing or tell a friend about us. Also go to magethepodcast.com for show notes on all of our previous shows. Now go change reality. Bye. Now I will bring back my slutty slua.
Exactly, yeah. I've pivoted, yep.
Hashtag slutty slua. Yeah, gosh.
You can find me at slutty slua. No,
gosh.
The thing that makes me like very concerned is normally I have a backup of everything, but it's just going to this box. And I assume the box people have made a good box. I've used the box before, but I'm never I'm never quite sure.
I'll be back here to talk about anything you want me to, Terry, if you want me back.
Well, thank you. It's been lively so far.
Yeah.
And I'm like, people.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Humans.
Yeah. And for the final step on your pilgrimage, you must navigate this room full of coffee tables that are all very pointy.
Oh, my Achilles shin.
I have a running joke that I'm like, my ultimate goal with Mage the podcast is to do a speed run of Mage the Ascension. Just get there as quickly as possible.
How do you do that, Terry?
I'm in. Sign me up.
I haven't figured it out yet, but like I still haven't figured out what a Mage the podcast April 1st episode would be. I have some ideas. Like one, I wanted to be just going through Porthos Fitzempress's voicemail. Just all these weird call-ins from people. Like Josh Heath, friend of the show and co-host, recorded me a bit where he gets a call from secret agent John Courage, talking about how he's infiltrated some Nephandic base, but also that he really needs to attend the Tuesday evening Esperanto courses that he agreed to do with him years ago. Because throughout first edition, Secret Agent John Courage, like his hopefulness was portrayed by the fact that he was frequently listed as having 1 dot in languages for Esperanto. So like, yeah, come for the secret agent, stay for the vaguely romantic language learning. So the lead singer for that group looks suspiciously like Javier Bardem, and I would just like to
I've never
put that
seen
out
the
to
two of them in
world.
the same place. Just saying.
All of them can turn on a Promethean. That was poor phrasing. It's like bird watching.
Yeah.
To watch them creepily from a distance.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
There are actually refinements that specialize in that.
Bird watching?
Yes.
People watching.
Yeah, okay.
Bird watching.
I did. By the way, I did take the bird watching refinement.
bird watching refinement.
I'll update my sheet for you. So.
Auspicium. I hope the 10 per continent is literal and like Australia is the best. Like just the smallest land area. Yeah. Like Antarctic Prometheans.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like Frankensteins have a canonical history of going to the icy wastes.
That's true. You're right. Yeah, they're all hanging out up there.
They're
it's
all
nice and quiet.
Yeah.
All
Narrative.
the penguins you can eat. Sorry.
That's the other one.
I know. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I will not stand for this on
No,
the show
you're
about
absolutely
wizards.
right. I can admit when I'm wrong. I just like the idea of them walking around munching on penguins. So
I'm perfectly fine. They bring that with them. That's why the pilgrimage takes so
there you
long.
go.
They have to do a
See,
round
yeah, they're
trip.
going the long way around, like Ewan McGregor did. Yeah. See, I pulled that one out of the fire. I saved
You
it.
took it. You turned it.
There's going to be 3 people in the world who get that joke. I'm so
I
sorry.
think 2 of them are sitting at the table, unfortunately.
I mean, I assume that's a Tropic Thunder reference.
A little
Plus
bit, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Plus Bertolt Brecht.
Yeah. Plus Bertolt Brecht.
That is a weird Venn diagram.
It's a
Of places
very
for this to
strange
come.
Venn diagram.
and the official weird connection of the game is brought to you by eharmony.com. I think that was one that I calcified. So I was the only character that could do things like sweat when it was hot out, eat food, everyone can eat, but like, have the enjoy the full experience of it, things like that. Be intimate with someone. I was the only character that could do that for a while because it was something that I carried with me on this journey.
Yeah, by spending 1 point of blood, you could use the blush of life to...
Exactly, yeah.
Kind of like
bit like
earlier
that.
when you were describing the Tammuz, and I'm like, that's just how you get a Sabbat vampire.
Dig
himself out.
Get your shovels out.
Yeah, get your shovels out.
CrossFit and transmutation.
Yeah, it is the CrossFit of
Yeah.
transmutations. Or the CrossFit of refinements.
Brought to you
Yeah.
by Bulletproof Coffee.
Yeah.
He never comes to our meetings and he doesn't clean up after his group sacrifices. He's a dick. Like, are there...
I can't. I've played 2 games of Promethean, and even I can't keep all the proper nouns straight sometimes.
Yep.
Somebody like submerged in the Skookle. Like,
Yeah.
what element is that?
Pollution.
Yeah.
Regret.
Yeah. This guy stop eating a hoagie over the body. I
Sorry.
We only know what we don't know. Here's the Yingling to take the edge off. I just like that she has a soft pretzel vape.
Yes.
In that.
Oh my god.
What water? Sorry.
Yeah. Could I make a uniquely Philadelphian Promethean with the element of wooder? A conversation for the ride home. Put a pin in that for later. It's different than water.
It is different than water. That's true.
On the quest for John. Don't fuck this up, Roomba. Don't fuck
Don't
this
fuck
up.
this up, Roomba. Come on, you can do this.
I just picture through this whole conversation we've talked about like the path the pilgrim takes, and I just think of my Roomba just like equal randing his way, and I'm like, I believe in you, buddy. We just need you enough charging stations, you'll make it.
3 days from now, you're going to see it just kind of buzz across the floor, and you're going to be like, you can do this.
Yeah.
I believe in you.
I haven't seen my Roomba in 3 days, and I'm worried the door is open and it's not an outdoor Roomba.
It's gone off to become a real boy.
That would be awkward.
let it go.
I support you, but also my flows are dusty. Dear sir.
Don't betray me, Swiffer. Fingertips are tingly. What does it mean? Yeah.
You're diabetic.
Is this what low blood sugar feels like?
Yeah. That took a turn.